Welcome to this PJI Zoom call. Glad you could all join us for this time. We're going to cover a lot of material today. Just to give you a brief overview, we're going to talk about the church finds its voice, the impact it had on the elections, and now what? How do we prepare to further empower the church to have their voice heard moving forward and to have a real impact? We're going to talk about a real big gold nugget for those of you who work for a church or ministry, not just to pastors, but any employee. It's going to be a big help for your retirement plans. We found out 98% are not aware of this, so we're going to make you aware of this if you're not already, and it's going to be a big benefit to you. So you definitely want to focus in on that when we talk about the 403b-9 program. And then we're going to talk to our Chief Counsel, Kevin Snider, about our lawsuit, the latest update on our major lawsuit we filed against Santa Clara County, as well as Governor Gavin Newsom of California. We're then going to talk about the new executive orders and directives that have come out from the Biden administration and how those can impact the church and people of faith. This is very important. This has been of very serious concern. This is going to be, from moving forward, we're going to do one of these every week sometimes, and it's going to be, the reason we're doing that is because this is also being recorded and broadcast for radio. It's a new show. It's called Just Answers with Brad Dacus, and it's going to be going out on more than 200 radio stations and transmitters across the country, and starting with this episode. So we're going to be doing this, Lord willing, and it's got a great opportunity. So it's a little different. So when we have Q&A at the end, what I want you to do, instead of just go ahead and send it on chat, but what we're going to do is first I want you to put your real first name and where you're from. So John from Boise, Idaho. So we want to have that so that we can address you when you come on. And then instead of just reading your question, we want to have you on the show. This is exciting, folks. So you'll send us the chat with your name and where you're from, and then the producer, Hanson and Emily, will be working this to then facilitate. So we'll say, okay, Steve from Las Vegas, you're on the program. What's your question? And then you'll give your question and you'll unmute yourself. And so that's how we've planned it. We'll see how it actually happens. This is the first go around. So this will be interesting to see how this works. So anyway, with that, let's we'll go ahead and open it up. Peter Mordh is our pastor liaison. He's our full-time pastor liaison here at Pacific Justice Institute, serving churches all across the United States, serving pastors. And Peter, I'd like you to go ahead and open us up now in prayer, if you would. Thank you.
All right, let's pray. Lord, we do thank you for your goodness to all of us. God, thank you for your grace. And Lord, it is the reason we rejoice. I thank you for all of the wisdom and the facts that we're going to be learning on this Zoom call. I pray that you would help us as we assimilate that into our ministries and nonprofits. I pray that you would lead us and guide us on this call. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now, Peter, I want you to give an update on the Church Finds Its Voice. What happened and where do we go from here to further empower the churches of America to have their voice heard come Election Day?
Absolutely, Brad. Well, we did several pastor meetings and encouraged hundreds of churches, both here in California and in Georgia, to get out the vote and to register, make sure that all of the people and members in their church were registered to vote. And we saw some great success with that here in Southern California. We're going to continue to do that. I've heard from dozens of pastors in Las Vegas and hundreds of pastors in the great state of Arizona as they are looking forward to meeting. We also have some pastors in Northern California we'd like to meet with as well. But we want every church to highlight voter registration the Sunday before Memorial Day and the Sunday before the 4th of July holiday. And I think this will just be a good time for us to encourage people in their civic duty and tell them what it means to be salt and light. And so we're looking forward to continuing this effort to engage voters who have biblical values.
Yeah, what I really like about this, Peter, the timing of having it Memorial Day, Sunday before Memorial Day, or before the 4th of July, is that it takes any semblance of politics out of it. It's very pure. It's simply saying, you know, the greatest thing we can do this Memorial Day to give respect and honor to those who've died in our country is what we can do this Sunday, and that is to register to vote. That is a statement of appreciation for what they've done on the battlefields defending our freedoms. Same thing with the 4th of July. This is the greatest statement, the greatest thing we can do to celebrate the 4th of July and the freedoms and liberties we have is right in the back there on a table where you can register to vote. More important than the sparklers, more important than the fireworks, yada, yada. And you're going to work with the pastors, any of them that have questions on how to do this, logistically, how you can work with their assistants, because I know the pastors are working with, busy with a lot of stuff. You're going to be available for any pastor at any time. We do all the work without charge, so that's correct. You're going to be available, right, Peter?
Yes, and I would just say that I think sometimes the misconception is that, well, everyone in my church will be involved, and honestly, that was a misconception in Georgia. We had contacted hundreds of churches and through other affiliates, thousands of churches, and there were still 70,000 conservative voters that didn't actually get out and vote. So we can't sit back and say the people in my church will vote because we have to continue to put it in front of our people and the responsibility of it as well.
Yeah, you worked this last time in Southern California to worked with 317 churches to get them to have voter registration Sundays. And then we know exactly there were 10,454 new voters registered, and it had a big impact, we know, on those 8 congressional districts. 6 of the 8 congressional districts had a decisive impact. So it's real. What we do works. Peter is on staff. He's here to work to help you and to take advantage of this. And an off-year election, I think, is the greatest way to approach this by far, because you don't have, once again, the worry of the politics being attached to it, which some churches sometimes feel that way, so they're more hesitant to do this before an election, months before an election. So this is a great thing to do. I encourage you to take advantage of it. Now I want to hit on the big golden egg that we've discovered for the pastors and churches and people who work for churches and ministries out there. And if you don't fit in that category, listen anyway, because you want to forward this information to your church. This is big. Peter, tell us about this 403b9 program for churches and ministries that most churches are not aware of. Most are just doing 403bs. Totally unaware of this. What is it?
Yeah, so I think probably most of us have heard of a 403b, and we think of teachers or hospitals or nonprofits. 403b9, I was not aware of until Brad started to kind of help our church and help me kind of understand exactly what it is. But it is specifically for churches and not just pastors, by the way. Anyone who's connected to a religious organization, such as a school that's under a church, or a Christian organization that's under a church, obviously churches, they have a specific privilege that the other, maybe a 401k or a 403b generally does not have. And I want to go over just a couple of those. First of all, one of the things that really helps is for the pastors. So the pastoral staff who have a housing allowance can actually, with proper documentation, and that's really the key, with proper documentation, you can actually continue that housing allowance even after you retire. So if right up front you say, I'm in the 403b9 and I want to make sure that my housing allowance continues even after I retire, that's something that you cannot do with a 401k. So that is a huge benefit. The other really nice thing about the 403b9 for a nonprofit is that there are so many more options available and far less documentation and red tape than the traditional 401k. So there's some research that has to be done, and you'll have to get exactly what you want as far as matching plans. And there's lots of different things that you would have to kind of go through and tailor make it to your ministry. But it is a great thing. It's one of those things that I think was hidden behind the 403b school teacher perception. And so we're thankful for it. And if you have questions specifically about this plan, as we are learning and helping others to know about it, we want to serve you and your church in this way. And so I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat, and you can feel free to email me, and I'll connect you with someone who can help you with that information or get you as much information as we have.
Okay, and also just what is your email address for those who aren't in the chat thing?
It's pmordh@pji.org.
So PMORDH at pji.org. Peter, you should be receiving a good number of emails within the next hour or two. And our bottom line, we're going to provide them the information that they need and the resources and the connections on how to move ahead on this. One of the things, so I want to point out just a real quick question I want to give you. I heard that an employee can give up to $63,000 of their income. They can cut it out and put it into a 403b9 instead of just the 15 or 20,000 or 24,000, right?
Well, absolutely. And the important thing to realize is obviously you wouldn't be able to touch that for a certain period, but you can put that in there. And the nice thing about it is it has so many more options. You're not locked into a certain grid like you would be in a 401k. So you could put that money in there and it would not be taxable. So if you make $50,000 in a given year and you're able to put, $20,000 away into retirement, you would only be taxed on the $30,000, not the 50. So that's how most retirement accounts work. But this has a lot more options, and frankly, it's tailor-made to churches and nonprofits.
So anyone working for a church, a secretary, a janitor, a pastor, they can qualify. They can have up to $63,000 of their income put into this retirement fund, which shields it from being taxed. So it's like a tax deduction. And then as far as taking it out, if they're a pastor and they qualify for the housing allowance, they can actually avoid paying taxes, taking it out when they retire. And this is like after they retire, they can have a housing allowance set up, and they can then draw it from this funds into that as a housing allowance, totally shielded from taxes, not only on the way in, but also on the way out. This is a no-brainer, folks. So once again, Peter, your email is pmordh@pji.org. We're going to have material available. We've got some people with some great expertise. We'll forward everything to you. All our work is always without charge. We just want to serve you. But this is a big golden egg for those of you out there involved in church ministries. And if you are not aware of this, or if you're not a part of a church, you attend a church, but you're not working for a church, still get this information and forward it on to your pastor. He'll say, "Oh yeah, we have a 403b. Yeah, we have a 403b. We're taking care of it. My financial advisor told me to do." They're not aware. They're simply not aware, and this could really help them prepare for retirement. So I probably put a lot of time on this one, but to me, I think it's deserving. About 98% of the pastors out there have no idea about a 403b9. When we found out about this in our research and our working with our wealth analyst, manager that we work with, which is Dr. Guy Baker, I thought we've got to get this out. So thank you, Peter, and keep up the good work. And I know there'll be a lot of pastors with questions, and you'll be either able to help them or send them to the person that can. So that's good. All right. Now I want to talk to our chief counsel, Kevin Snider. He coordinates our litigation at Pacific Justice Institute. But specifically, there's a very important case out of Santa Clara County where Pacific Justice Institute sued not only Santa Clara County, but also California Governor Gavin Newsom with regards to the church shutdowns that have taken place. Kevin, welcome to the program, and give us a heads up on what this case was about and what happened. Where are we at?
I'd be happy to, Brad. One of PGI's approximately 50 cases involves churches in the Santa Clara County area, and we're suing both the health officials, the county, and the governor for the shutdowns. About 99.9% of the population of California is under a shutdown as far as the churches go. So we have challenged that 2 weeks ago. I argued a motion for a preliminary injunction, and last Friday the court granted in part and denied in part that motion. So starting with the good news is that the court has, when California goes into these lower tiers like tier 2 and 3, these caps on attendance have been enjoined by the court. On the other hand, the bad news is that the most stringent cap, the absolute ban under the what they call tier 1 or the purple tier, is still in place. So we've already filed a notice of appeal on that part of of our motion that was not successful, and so we are looking to do battle in the Ninth Circuit, and if necessary, the Supreme Court.
Now, Kevin, briefly though, why do we have a good shot at challenging that tier 1 placement of churches in view of the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision out of New York?
I think the main thing is that we are using as a comparison airports, and you say, why? What difference does that make? Well, other cases have not used that, and airports are specifically been exempted. They've decided that airports are important and churches are not. And under the holding in the recent Supreme Court case of a Roman Catholic Archdiocese versus Governor Cuomo, we think that is very susceptible to challenge. And another reason for airports is, in some respects, they're very much like churches. When you go to a gate to await your departure, they're similar in terms of the time you have to wait, 45 minutes to 90 minutes. They're similar in terms of numbers, between 100 and 400 people are there. And they're similar in terms of physical space. So that's very much like a church. So we think we've got a good shot at this.
Yeah, I think so too. And when you read the opinion and some of our material on the New York case that the Supreme Court ruled on, the general principle, as I understand it, Kevin, is that churches cannot be put in the back of the bus, that they are essential in terms of their First Amendment protection, and hence that they cannot be more strictly shut down than a secular entity out there, i.e. A mode of transportation. Actually, they use the word transportation, entities of transportation, so it goes right along with what we're arguing regarding the airport. That's my take on it. I think we've got a good shot. We're going, I guess, to the Ninth Circuit at this point. If not the Ninth Circuit, what about the Supreme Court with Amy Coney Barrett? What's the chance we have, do you think, of seeing a very solid decision on this in favor of churches being treated fairly and equally?
Well, the way this would work procedurally is this goes to one justice who handles this area, this part of the country. And what has been that justice is Justice Kagan, but she has been sending, and most of the justices have been sending these to the full panel, the full group of 9 justices for review. So anything could happen. There's absolutely no guarantees whether or not a case will be accepted. Any judge, any attorney who tells you that is delusional or lying to you. But we think this does have a good shot at being reviewed.
Yeah. Now, Kevin, also I know that we produced recently for businesses a legal memorandum. In fact, I've got it right here. It's 18 pages long, folks. You can't really see it. The light makes it look like a white piece of paper, probably. but it's there are actually words on this. It's 18 pages long, and it talks all about how businesses have rights in view of, say, the recent case law and the Constitution's application when it comes to reopening and challenging unreasonable shutdowns. I think it's actually very encouraging. It's very empowering. I think, and at the end of the, we have a good portion of it are, I think it's 8 things that businesses can do to further enhance their ability to reopen or to challenge the shutdown of their business. Very specific, very concrete. This is available without charge on our website. And so if you know of businesses out there that could benefit, i.e. most of the businesses in a lot of blue states, we want to get this out and so they can glean from this and not be frustrated, but understand where they are and be empowered all the more. So thank you for the work that you did on that as well. I appreciate that. In fact, our attorney out of Mississippi, he did just a fantastic job, Ron Hackberg, on his research and development on a lot of that research for that. So thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. We've also seen the President Biden. We've seen him come down with a number of new executive orders that can impact churches, religious freedom. There's a lot of executive orders impacting many ways in terms of economically, in terms of jobs in a negative way. But I want to focus, though, on the impact on things that we monitor, like religious freedom, parental rights, sanctity of human life. Kevin and Emily, I want Emily to come on. Emily is the attorney who heads up our office there in Nevada. And I want you both of your input on assessing the significance of some of these executive orders. Kevin, what's one that comes to your mind that you think we need to be aware of?
Brad, I think first thing to remember is let me give you a quote from Biden. He says that LGBTQ plus rights are the, quotes, civil rights issue of our time, end quote. That tells you a lot about where he's going on this. He has recently signed an executive order that would, you take the word sex and it would include sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, this executive order does not just apply to areas of employment, but also in education and in immigration, in the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Fair Housing Act. And further, he's ordered all federal agencies to implement the decision, the infamous decision of Bostock versus Clayton County. So that is a very, very troubling executive order.
So Bostock, that case was dealing just with employment. That's what the Supreme Court said. We're going to define sex broadly to include sexual orientation and gender identity. Dealt with just employment discrimination, but he's actually stretching that beyond that to apply it to education and all kinds of other entities, all kinds of other applications. Why would that be a concern for people of faith, say in schools? What's an example that you can think of?
Well, certainly. I mean, there's situations right now, and it's very common, in fact, where students are being radicalized in school, saying that if you're depressed, not comfortable with yourself, maybe it's that you're in the wrong body. And so with that, these kids, sometimes they tell their parents, sometimes they do not, but they certainly tell the school that they are now the opposite biological sex. And then they demand all sorts of accommodations for them, such as restrooms, locker rooms, and the like, names, pronouns, and I've seen these in black and white memos, internal memos from school districts, where if the parent's not on board, don't tell the parent. And so these kids can live a double life, and now we've got federal cover to let them do just that against the wishes of their parents.
Yeah, this order reverses President Trump. His executive order said, reversed President Obama, who said that boys can go into girls' locker rooms if they claim that they feel like they're a girl in any public school that receives any federal funds, which is most public schools, one way or the other. Trump stopped that. Biden has resurrected it. And now our boys and girls across America in locker rooms are going to be subject to being visually violated on a daily basis pursuant to the command, the executive order of President-elect Biden. shame on him, needless to say. Yes.
I'm just going to add, I think it's not just the, frankly, I think obvious denial of biological reality. And of course, it's not just locker rooms, outside of the locker rooms when you're playing sports. I think it was the Wall Street Journal actually had a headline that said the first day of the Biden administration marks the end of women's sports. And I think that is true. We've already seen that out of cases in Connecticut. We're seeing it across the country. So it's, it's in the locker rooms. We're seeing the denial of biological reality on the sports fields. And we're also seeing not just the erosion of, I think, what logic and common sense tells us, but we're also seeing, as Kevin was saying, we're seeing that also chipping away at the traditional family-parent relationship and parental rights. And we've already been dealing with cases, as you know, in Washington state and across the country, where as you note, school districts are actually enshrining these rules and telling teachers, do not tell parents, lie to parents, do not tell them that your student who is a biological male is choosing to be addressed with pronouns and maybe names or a name in your school as a female. And so they're actually instructing teachers to be dishonest with parents. So it's not just the biological reality of the student. It's also really trying to, I would say, chip away and erode the importance of the parent relationship and parental rights.
Yeah, I know today, just today, we got a call from a pastor who has a family in his church who found out that their child, 7th grader, that she was given a questionnaire. It was just recently, it was today or yesterday. And the questionnaire had all these questions about, do you feel like you're the opposite sex? Do you feel like you're transgender? Putting a lot of thoughts and doubts at a time in life when they are wrestling with their gender and in the transition. It's a very sensitive, very vulnerable time in life. This is implemented in a school district in California. And I understand this is actually going all throughout California now, pursuant to the California Health Youth Act. So this is going to be nationwide, and people need to understand this. And one of the parts of the material was that they said, by the way, they said, don't worry, your parents will never will never see this, they'll never know this, they'll never see this review or your questions or your answers to these questions. And that's happening. In real time, I was on that conversation earlier today. So, and our attorney's already working on that. I've already referred him to our attorneys out of our Sacramento office. So this is very serious, and I appreciate you bringing that to light. So once again, we're going to also have girls now having no rights when a boy wants to wrestle and girls wrestling. You may have this big guy saying, yeah, I'm ready to wrestle you, to a female, and the female either drops out or is in a very uncomfortable, possibly even dangerous situation, mentally, emotionally. It's tragic. So that's very real. What's one dealing with the what's another one dealing with the executive orders? Isn't there something in the military involving the LGBTQ that he's issued an executive order on?
At this time, he's pledging to go forward with this regarding transgendered persons in the military. That has not been signed yet, so we are hoping, obviously, that he doesn't compromise our military's preparedness.
Right. And that would, and my understanding, Kevin, is that would require require payment for their surgical procedure. So they join the military would have to pay for all the medical costs and expenses for the hormone shots, surgical procedure, cutting off body parts. And it doesn't actually cure anything mentally, emotionally, and there's no biological issue, but they're cutting off body parts. So, I mean, obviously my bias here is showing why I don't think it's a good policy, but it also is not only going to be costly in that regard, but my understanding also is that if the male says that they're female, they'll be entitled to shower with the women, to dress with the women in the military. I can't help but see this as having a major problem with regard to morale of women in the military, and as well as some males who are going to feel very uncomfortable moving forward as well. So that's a serious concern. What about the unborn in the pro-life area? I understand that executive orders were signed dealing with the promoting the killing of the unborn. What say you?
Well, yeah,
Or Kevin?
but go ahead.
Oh,
Who do you
Emily?
want to respond?
Emily? No? Or Kevin? Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay.
I thought Kevin was going to jump in, but sure. I mean, we're seeing that both with the Mexico City Amendment, which is being discussed at length. We're seeing it with, I think it's Executive Order 14009, talking about strengthening Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. And well, I have good news on that front, but I'll let Kevin go first.
Well, yeah, I think you've hit that. It's the Mexico City policy has been reenacted so that your tax dollars are going to go to organizations which perform or advise women and girls to get abortions overseas.
Wow. So we're going to be funding abortions in other countries with taxpayer dollars. That's how zealous they are towards killing the unborn, this administration. So, yeah.
There is good news on that front, Brad. I would say just as a note of optimism in the face of what's coming out of the White House, today marks the first day, as far as I'm aware, that Texas is officially no longer giving money to Planned Parenthood. They deemed them last year not to be a suitable provider of healthcare services. So thanks to, I bet most folks listening are familiar with the work of David Daleiden, where a couple years ago, Planned Parenthood offered to sell him an aborted baby's liver for $750. Brad, I think you're smiling as Texas is your home state. And they heard his testimony. Obviously, Kamala Harris actually gave Mr. Daleiden an extremely hard time back when she was in California. But he was able to stop funding for Planned Parenthood as an approved Medicaid provider in Texas. And that means millions of dollars no longer flowing into their coffers, at least in one state. So although the White House has one agenda, there are people of faith, including Mr. Daleiden, and all the efforts surrounding that to help at least push back. And so it's important to point out that there's something we can do, locally and on the state front with our state legislatures.
Okay. So, yeah, so some good news in that regard. And we need to encourage our states to be proactive and look at what Texas is doing. I am proud of my Texas heritage in times like this, that's to say the least. So, although I was actually technically born in California, so I'm a hybrid. What about any other executive orders do you guys think we need to be focusing on to let people know about that could impact them moving forward?
Maybe not executive orders, but Biden has pledged to pass the Equality Act in his first 100 days. And that's going to be, if that occurs, then you're going to have significant trouble in the churches. And what you would have, there will be, the Equality Act takes away the religious protection, religious exemption for hiring. And so churches, when you have people who come out of the closet, transvestites, that sort of thing, in the church who are your employees, you're not going to have the protections that you used to have under federal law.
Like a youth minister, for example. They suddenly come out and they say, hey, I just want you to know that here's my gay partner, or I'm going to change my gender, and I'm really looking forward to working with the junior high and high schoolers in our church. You would not be able to fire them the way that language is written. And I understand it's supported by just about every Democrat in the House and the Senate. I mean, just over 90% of on that. And also there's the Do No Harms Act, which is a sequel to that, which is also, I know is going to be pushed as well, impacting churches, businesses, schools, private schools. It could be horrific. And that's of course, of serious concern moving forward. If the filibuster is maintained, which it looks like it will be, could it be said that there's a good chance that could be at least blocked for the next 2 years, possibly by the Senate? What's your take, Emily or Kevin? Just jump in.
I would certainly hope for that. It is so radical. If people, it's very deceptive, right? The Equality Act sounds great. Everyone's for equality. But when you actually read what it does, like you were saying, like Kevin was saying, we're talking about schools, we're talking about churches, we're talking about hospitals. Hospitals are getting sued right now because you have hospitals of faith, for example, that don't want to perform a hysterectomy on a perfectly healthy biological female because there's absolutely no medical reason, and they're being sued by the ACLU right now. And so if you pass something like the Equality Act, now they have the whole weight of the federal government behind them saying that you have to perform these procedures. And we're already seeing that attack in the psychiatric industry, where we're having counselors being forced out. So it really would snowball. So I think it's really important to get the message out there to help people actually understand what it's really doing, not just what they're telling. And I would say that we have a petition on our website and a description of it at www.pji.org. And you can read more about it. And I would really encourage folks to do that.
Yeah, I know. Not long ago, I represented a counselor, a licensed counselor, psychologist in Texas. He was brought before the Texas tribunal, if you will, for psychiatry, psychology, and he was being attacked because he gave counseling to those struggling with same-sex attraction, gender identity, and we made it very clear that they immediately should dismiss it, or we were going to take it to the Supreme Court if necessary. And they, on a unanimous vote, after months and months of dragging this thing out at the hearing, they dismissed it. But I see this as a real threat, and we're looking to take this on. I think we're going to be challenged more this year, definitely, than last year, in that as the pandemic wanes, we're going to have a new, fresh number of cases coming in as a result of these executive orders impacting and legislation impacting churches, businesses, people of faith in the military, et cetera. So it's a definite point of concern. Emily, I want you to touch on, if you would, the current status of the COVID directives and what that means for churches.
Sure. I think we said that we would give a brief overview of California. So as Kevin said, 99.9% of California right now is in tier 1 purple. That is the most restrictive status for churches. That means that you are not allowed by the state order not to meet indoors. Counties like Santa Clara County, for example, are more restrictive in restricting what you can do outdoors as well. But we are seeing some improvements. Of course, we saw the lifting of the regional lockdown orders, so people are no longer being ordered to stay in their homes. So that is an improvement, of course. But overall, you're generally seeing businesses in those sectors fall into one of 4 categories. You're generally open with modifications, and then you need to look to your industry sector, if you're in construction, if you're in retail, to see what the specific requirements are. Then you have open to 25% capacity. That's generally most retailers. Grocery stores are at 50%, unless your county is, again, more restrictive. Then you have areas that are outdoor only, and you have areas that are strictly closed. So outdoor only, for example, is where you see political protests in churches right now being shoehorned.
Okay, and once again, we have a memorandum for business owners wanting to reopen on our website to know their rights and be empowered to do so. We've helped some in particular, I can't talk about it, it's attorney-client privilege, but helped them come up with some real interesting creative ideas and reformatting that is allowing them to reopen and get back into business. So I think they'll find that a real blessing, that memorandum. Once again, it's available on our website, pji.org. Emily, what about the schools? I understand that San Francisco is suing San Francisco Unified School District to reopen the schools. And what's going on there? And I understand there's other places in the country also where we're seeing this kind of butting of heads between the school districts and the teachers union versus other entities like cities saying, open up the schools, the kids aren't at risk. What's going on?
Right now, the battle, frankly, I don't know how else to put it, the battle between people who want schools to open and schools, mainly it seems like the teachers unions, pushing very strongly to stay shut. We're seeing that play out. There's lawsuits right now in New Jersey, in New York. Of course, it's coming to a head right this very minute in Chicago. That's the 3rd largest school district in the nation, where Lori Lightfoot, who she and I don't agree on too much. We don't trade Christmas cards, but I did agree with her. And I was nodding along earlier this week when she was saying, you know what, she's fed up. People need to get back to work. 10% of students, well, 100% of students haven't been in the classroom just about for almost a year, but 10% haven't even logged on to their virtual servers. So they're getting literally no education. And in San Francisco, as you say, the city attorney, with the backing of the mayor, has actually filed a lawsuit against their own school district. That was yesterday. And in their filing, they called it, quote, shameful not only unlawful because they're not using their best efforts to provide in-person schooling, but shameful. So,
Yeah.
so it's definitely escalating.
I personally think it is shameful in that kids are not at risk. So these are teachers and with the teachers union who simply don't want to work. Some of them, if they have high risk, they can be accommodated. But this is outrageous. People in our grocery stores, they work. Our gas stations, they work. Airlines, they work. Hospitals, they work. But the teachers, the government, the union, public school teachers are insisting they want to stay home. They don't want to work. And it's not for the kids. It's for their own selfish interests. And it's very disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. And that's my personal opinion.
I would just add, in fairness, I think there's been a lot of fear mongering. And so there is, I think some teachers are genuinely afraid to go back. And that's because of a lot of the hyperbole we saw in the lead into the election with concerns about the vaccine. And yesterday, the director of the CDC actually said it is safe to reopen schools without being vaccinated. And of course, later the press secretary for the White House had to walk that back because that was not consistent with the messaging out of the White House. So
right.
I think there's a lot of mixed messages not really helping.
Yeah, and good point. Yeah, the Centers for Disease Control, though, made it very clear. There's not a risk here. Open up the schools. They've said it. But I can see with all the propaganda and stuff from the teachers union why some of the teachers would be ignorant and confused, and that is what it is. But I know parents are speaking out, and I know we at Pacific Justice Institute have been very clear to point this out, this injustice to our kids and our families in some of our other broadcasts that we have. Also, finally, before we get to the Q&A, I want to talk real briefly about the PPP loans. These are a great opportunity, aren't they, Emily? What should churches know, and how do they know if they qualify? Say they qualified last time, would that mean they would automatically qualify this time?
If you qualified last round, you're almost certainly qualified if you can demonstrate that you had a 25% decrease in gross receipts for any quarter year on year. So Q3 last year versus Q3 in 2019. So pick a quarter. If you can demonstrate you had a 25% decrease in gross receipts or year on year, that works too. That's the main difference. Also, you need to have only 300, not 500 employees. But I'm happy to walk you through all the details of that program. I think it's a great opportunity if you qualify, if you're in need to find extra funding to get you through these times.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. And once again, folks, all our services are without charge. Our representation of your church, if you're a part of a church, is without charge. Everything is without charge. So don't hesitate to contact us. Emily, Kevin, any of our attorneys. We have attorneys coast to coast all across the United States. Just a little reminder, because many of you are watching this from other states. We have 4 offices in California, 1 in Oregon, Washington State, Nevada, Colorado, Texas, Mississippi, Florida, and New York, which also serves New Jersey. And we're looking at for some other places too in the country. So if you're interested in helping us open an office in some of these other cities, feel free to contact us. And thank you to many of you out there who do support the work of Pacific Justice Institute. That's how we're able to do what we do, and I greatly appreciate that so much. Now let's go to questions. Once again, put your question in the chat box, and with your name and where you're from, and then we'll take you. Then when we call your name and say, then just unmute yourself, and we'll be happy to take your question. So let's give this a shot. All right, the first one we have is Al. He's the senior pastor in Washington State of a church. Al, what's your question? How can we help you?
Well, the question is, Brad, since we've opened up, we were doing all the spacing of seatings and, trying to make it very comfortable according to the guidelines. But because nobody's coming or nobody's open, our church has grown dramatically, and it's hard to seat people. We have another room, a couple other rooms, but nobody really wants to sit in those rooms. We're already at 2 services, going to 3 services. And I just want to know what to do. I mean, what do you guys recommend? Because we've had a warning. Right now, we've had a current warning. Some visitor from another church, actually from up north, turned us in. And,
really?
They said we were violating. But we're trying to do the best we can. The people here need a place of normality, and they're hurting, they're dying, their suicide rates are up. They have no hope. and I can't turn them away as a pastor. I can't. Look at these sheep, they're wandering. COVID has
Right.
caused them to wander. They're coming, the word's being taught, and they're loving it, and they're not leaving.
Well, yeah, I used to be. Let me just give my input. I want to get input from Emily too on this, and or Kevin. But I know I used to be a part of a church, and it was growing, and they hadn't built their main worship center yet, and they had 2 services on Saturday evening, and then they had 4 services on Sunday. And I mean, it was, it's a bit exhausting. But I know one thing right off the bat is increasing your number of services. That is, taxing and laborious. But I know that's one thing that comes to my mind. Emily, what are your thoughts on this? What are some advice do you have that you might have for this pastor?
Unfortunately, I don't have a magic way to make your sanctuary bigger. I would if I could. I say congratulations. It's wonderful that you're preaching the word, and obviously lots of people are looking for that right now. With people wanting to be indoors and not, the overflow crowding is never popular. I would try to reach out to your local churches and see if you can get other people to support you and let them know you have this need. Alternatively, of course, as Brad said, more services. You can always try to get creative with the seating. Try to work with the local authorities and see what they can suggest, and let them know that you have this moral obligation and this moral duty really to minister to your flock. And we are dealing with here in my state, Nevada. We definitely get OSHA complaints from people, usually not from the community, who either don't understand what's going on or think that there's a violation when maybe there's not. And we're certainly able also to help you respond to those, as we have had to address a number of those issues, not just in Nevada but across the country.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Also, I encourage churches, if you can, to have some semblance of an outdoor service. The tent, chairs, and have some people on the outside. Oftentimes, local governments, they'll drive by the public health officer. They'll see, okay, they're doing something outside. Okay, they're fine. They often don't want to have to investigate and clamp down on a church. So give them some ability to say, yeah, I drove by, I saw they have an outdoor service, check mark. But you've already received a warning. Emily, Kevin, any advice on what he should do now, though? I mean, he's got a warning saying basically you can't have an indoor service, period. What do you say to that? I mean,
Well, Brad, the warning was just a warning to, hey, you're overdoing it. If it happens again, if we find out, then we will, further educate you. So it's one of those warnings. It hasn't
okay,
been
so
really.
you're overdoing it, meaning you have too many people at one time in the church sanctuary.
Yes, too many people, not, you don't have the 6 feet distance and stuff like that, yeah.
Okay, and then we have a 96-point checklist on our website, safety checklist for churches who want to have indoor services. We also have one for outdoor services too, but I strongly recommend you to take a look at that and try to utilize as much of that as possible. The decision that came out of New York in favor of the church's rights to be able to have indoor services, at the very least, the same occupancy as secular gatherings. One thing they did point out, one of the factors was the fact that the churches were above reproach in terms of their health safety protocol. Really important. Well, we've got the best protocol. Emily put it together for you to utilize on our website without charge. So thank you for that great question. And we're here to serve you if you have other questions. Contact us and we'll be happy to help you. Sharon from Hacienda Heights, I think it is. Sharon from Hacienda Heights. What's your question, Sharon?
Thank you for taking me. Regarding the 403B9, is that a state statute or a federal statute?
I'll jump up in. That's a federal statute. That's 26 CFR section 1.403B9. That stands for Code of Federal Regulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Emily has the entire code memorized. That's why. No. That was really good. That was good. So yeah, we'd love to work with your church on that. It's a no-brainer. It is a no-brainer. We've got some great people with expertise like Dr. Guy Baker, who has a lot of expertise and able to help your church work through that. It's something to take advantage of. like I say, it's a no-brainer.
I'll be sure to tell Father John, and I know he'll be interested. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, we'd love to serve him. George from, it says here, George from, George, I'll move on because I don't see a topic on that. Sorry about that. Let's do Grant, Christian School Administration in Fullerton. What's your question, Grant? How can we help you?
Hi, Brad. Thank you so much for the work you guys do. You guys have been a big help to us, especially early on in the pandemic with reopening our school. My question is specifically in regard to the new administration's executive orders. I know we talked a little bit about the Equality Act that might be coming on the docket, but as far as the current executive orders go, do these affect the legal rights of Christian schools to hire according to our convictions about the historic understanding of sexuality and gender as the orders stand right now?
As they stand right now, Emily?
No, I don't believe that they do. There's been a push, obviously, by the administration to amplify the impact of the Bostock decision from last year from the Supreme Court, looking to redefine sex as being sexuality. But I would suggest looking at the Our Lady of Guadalupe case that came out also last year, which was looking at the ministerial exception, which specifically looks at schools hiring and firing decisions. So I would say for now, I would feel very confident that you have robust provisions. The Equality Act, of course, is looking to trouble that, but for now, I would feel confident on that front.
Okay, that's good to know, because that's one of the big things we've been concerned about is with the change in administration, especially at the start of another round of hiring. Yeah,
Right.
So thank you guys.
Yeah, you bet. Also, we're talking here about the federal threat. There's still state statutory threats that may be coming up as well, and particularly in blue states and dark blue states. And that's one reason why we're opening these offices in these states and cities that pose a statewide or local government challenge, as well as what we can see coming from the Biden administration. Yes.
Grant, I'll add one thing that Kevin and Brad always do a good job of pointing out is that there's also ways schools can protect themselves in the way you put together your job description. So when you're hiring, you want to make sure that there is a religious or ministerial component, maybe not for your custodial staff, but certainly for your teachers who are leading prayer. And, even if you're teaching science or biology, which I believe was the case in the Guadalupe case from last year, there can still always be a religious component because Christian education or any religious education is comprehensive and in theory, at least, should permeate all subjects.
Yeah,
Kevin?
we definitely have that. So that's good. We have a doctrinal statement that all of our faculty have to affirm. So that would cover that, I would think.
Yeah, excellent. Kevin Snider, Chief Counsel. We have those bylaws, recommended bylaws, as well as mission preservation policies available for churches online, correct?
We have some bylaws. There are things you need to do. Obviously, Emily has alluded to them. One is, of course, ministerial statements. Other thing is have a contract. That is helpful. Year-to-year contract. Also, in your employee handbook, have a clear not recommendations, but clear requirements, preconditions and continual conditions for employment, which includes agreement with the statement of faith and as well as conduct.
Okay, very good. Jeffrey, are you there? Could you, what's your question? I don't see where you're from, but that's okay.
Thank you. Jeffrey, pastor in San Mateo, California, San Francisco metro area.
Great.
And my question was regarding the appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court for emergency injunction by South Bay Pentecostal Church. Has there been an update on that? I know it was before the Supreme Court or being considered by the Supreme Court right now.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, that petition for emergency relief is still pending. It was filed with Justice Kagan, who handles the West Coast. So we're still waiting on that.
Do we have any feelings about that? How it would go once you've read? I've read the filing. I'm curious.
I've read. I think it probably would not be appropriate for me to comment on. on that. So
Okay, I mean, it affects everyone on this
Yeah.
call. I'm sorry, I didn't mean,
no,
everyone here is curious, right? Because we're watching all of these.
yeah, I think one of the problems is that it's quite fact heavy.
Yes,
And so when something is fact heavy, the Supreme Court doesn't typically like to deal with it. They want a narrow issue of law where the facts are agreed upon. And
right.
so that is why I have some concerns about, I'm not that optimistic. Now I could be surprised. I hope I'm surprised, but that's just kind of telling it like it is.
Yeah,
that was
appreciate it.
good. Yeah, very good question. I appreciate that. And if we can ever help you, your church in any way, pastor or anyone in the Bay Area, just always let us know. We have an office right there in the San Francisco Bay Area for obvious reasons. So
Yeah.
now, Mitra in Princeton, New Jersey. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mitra, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wondered if any of these mandates or anything that's been done so far is going to force pastors to do same-sex marriages, or is that coming up?
Very good question. Kevin?
Well, I don't see that on the horizon. In the Supreme Court, in its decisions in a couple of cases, even the cases that affirmed same-sex marriage and same-sex benefits, government benefits, did go out of its way to say that it would not force ministers to perform same-sex marriages. That being said, we always have to caveat that we do have, I believe, a very radical person sitting in the Oval Office. He took it upon himself to marry a same-sex couple against his faith. He did this in 2016. I would dare say call him an apostate Roman Catholic, and so I do have concerns.
Yeah, I know some Catholic friends of mine who are very troubled, very troubled by that as well as all Christians who see that. Thank you for that question. Leap, I think that's right, from Spokane, Washington. Leap from Spokane, Washington. What's your question?
Today, just a quick question. As a West Coast retired pastor, we have been getting a lot of questions from some of our Christian groups within the town, not just single churches, about how these recalling of public officers are going, and what approach do you recommend churches take in this realm?
Interesting point. Recalling public officers. I think the most important thing that I can see is with two things. One is to continue to teach the Bible, everything in the Bible, the whole Bible, nothing but the Bible. Maybe anyway, just you get the point. And what the Bible teaches about issues and policies as applied to today. Second is to have your people exhorted to and enabled to register to vote and why they need to vote. It's about their testimony. If a church truly cares about people outside their church walls and they're filled with the love of Jesus, they're going to vote. Voting is a manifestation of our testimony as Christians. Those are the two, I think, most important things. As far as specifically the church endorsing a recall and the like, Kevin, Emily, any thoughts on that?
Can't do it.
That's quick, easy answer. So basically, you're going back to the Johnson Amendment, Kevin, in terms of the limitations on a church endorsing a candidate or not. What about those churches out there, the hundreds has videotapes of pastors endorsing candidates or criticizing candidates behind the pulpit? They sent those to the IRS. Nothing's been done on those. Might a church have us take if they really feel convicted about a recalling? Is that something they should take into consideration as an assessment of their risk or lack of risk?
Well, clearly there is some risk. The Pulpit Sunday that I think you're referring to, and others have been engaged in, a lot of that is calculated to try to goad this IRS into taking the church to court. And so, if you feel that is your conviction And I've represented churches on these types of issues. It's, I would say, proceed according to conscience. And there is a place for deliberately disobeying the law in order to bring it to court to challenge it. And so there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
One example, Brad, I'll give, I saw Craig here gave a comment about Biden's comments not being consistent with the Catholic Church's teachings on abortion, which I think is obvious, and the Catholic Conference of Bishops came out and said so. And the Archbishop of San Francisco has repeatedly slammed Pelosi for the same thing. One thing that can be done without endorsing a recall is something that happened a while ago. I don't know of a recent example, but Gray Davis, I believe, claimed to be asserted that he was a Catholic, and he was, of course, pro-choice, pro-abortion, and the church then refused him communion. And in fact, there was a tradition of the governor's office sending toys every Christmas as basically a publicity stunt to the local orphanage, which was Catholic run. And they said, no, if you have so little respect for the unborn, we don't need your charity. We're quite fine without you. So there are certain actions you can take without necessarily endorsing a recall that make it clear exactly how you feel. And I should say, I think there was a question about the current status of the recall. I believe in California, it is at 1.4 million signatures so far. They need 1.495. I believe the goal is 1.8 because invariably some of those signatures are thrown out for various reasons. They need, under state law, 12% of the population to get it on the ballot. Historically, recalls are not very common. I only know of 2 examples of governors being removed from office, one of whom, of course, was Mr. Davis.
Now, if they, Emily, if a church decided that they wanted to allow a recall petition table set up, say outside their church, let's say in the public sidewalk off their church property, but right next to their church, I mean, could they do that? I mean, that's not church property. The church isn't endorsing it. What do you think?
I would think it would be okay if the church was not endorsing it or in any way funding it. But just because it's not on church property does not mean it's not church funded. And you'll see that with there's an example of a anti-Clinton campaign that went nationwide that ran afoul of the Johnson Amendment years ago. So you do need to be very careful about that.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I wanted to ask because the left-leaning church leaders have for years had politicians come into the pulpit and just out and out say, I think you should vote for this guy, and he solicits votes. Now, if on the conservative side, the Bible-believing side, one of these pastors here wants to have a politician over to talk about the man's faith, just tell your faith story.
Yes.
I'm not endorsing the man. The left is still going to be, coming at you. How could you legally cover yourself to say, I invited this gentleman who serves our community to come and talk about his faith? Because they'll be looking for ways to shut that down.
Yeah, excellent question. We actually on our website have a resource click under churches, and it's Church and Politics. And it's very conservative, mind you. It doesn't put you out on the edge of the cliff for a church, but this is one of the things we talk about, and we give counsel to pastors and churches on how they can have someone come in. If they come in their capacity, not as a person running for office, but as a member of the body of Christ, sharing what the Lord's done or their testimony and that kind of information with a disclaimer, making it clear that they're not here in their capacity as a candidate, but in their capacity as a member of the body of Christ, that this is something that they should not hesitate that they should be willing to do. But feel free to have a church, always feel free to contact us, as well as look at that resource on our website. I do appreciate, that's a very good question. I want to thank all of you with that in mind. I want to thank all of you for participating. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. We're probably going to mention the 403B9 again, but also talk about some other issues of the day, as well as those that are directly, specifically impacting people of faith and churches, as well as other freedom-related issues. It's been a blessing having you on this program. And remember, always, no matter what we're faced with, keep the faith.